Let's talk a little bit more about this name that no one uses. One of the 10 Commandments is against using this name foolishly. And so from about the middle of the 2nd century BCE, Jews stopped saying the name Yahweh. It was only pronounced once a year by the high priest on the highest feast day. Instead, they started saying the Hebrew word for Lord when they came to the word Yahweh on the page. And the Hebrew word for Lord is Adonai. Now, at that time, in the 2nd century BCE, Hebrew didn't have any vowels. Well, it had vowels. You can't really speak without vowels. You just make some sort of clicking noises. But it didn't have vowel symbols. They had letters only for consonants. It wasn't until about between 800 and 1000 CE that vowel letters were added to printed Hebrew Bibles. And you can imagine that in the centuries leading up to that time, it would have been difficult sometimes to remember not to say what you see on the page, because on the page you see YHWH or Yod He Vav He. You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say Adonai, which means Lord. That's not what's written there. So you imagine some synagogue around the year 300 CE, and it's old Mordecai's turn to read from the scrolls, and we all know that he says the word every time. We just keep reminding him not to say it, and there he goes, and he reads Yahweh again. Oh, sorry. But that's what's in front of him, and he forgot to substitute. So when vowel letters were invented and inserted around 900 CE, someone got a brilliant idea. Let's not put the vowels of Yahweh on the consonants of Yahweh because we're not to pronounce it anyway. So instead, they put the vowel letters of Lord, or rather the vowel letters of Adonai, which means Lord. So if I'm looking in a written page of the Hebrew Bible, I see the consonants of one word, Yahweh, and the vowel symbols, they go as little dots above and below the consonants. I see the vowel dots for a different word, Adonai. And this solves the problem because when you're reading along, you get to this unpronounceable thing and you see what word is indicated by the vowels, which is Lord, and you say that instead. All well and good. Except in the 9th century CE, Christians and Jews had not been talking to each other for a very long time. So with the arrival of the early Renaissance and the humanist era that began in the 13th century, Western Europe rediscovered Hebrew. And Christian scholars learned the Hebrew language that was really unknown for many centuries. So around the year 1250, a Christian scholar says something like, "The Jews know the name of God. Now that we can read their letters, we can see what God's name is. And God's name is Yod, that's Y, except there is no Y in Latin, so they write I or J. Then comes the vowel. Now remember, he's reading the vowels of Adonai. So the first vowel is A. And then comes He, H. And the second vowel of Adonai, O. And then comes Vav, V. And then the third vowel of Adonai, I. And a final He, H. And when you put it all together, you get Jehovah. The Jewish community must have been doubled over laughing. He's read a word that doesn't exist. They've read the consonants of Yahweh and the vowels of Adonai, which are not meant to be read together. Jehovah is not God's name. It's not even a word. It's based on a Christian misunderstanding of what the Jews had done with the text. It originates with an obscure 13th century Dominican. Of course, it's all over the place now. It's not any God's name. Now, you may wonder, if the Jews stopped pronouncing it before they ever wrote down vowels, how do we know it's Yahweh and not Yehu or Yuwo? Well, the answer is that non-Jewish Greeks and some Greek-speaking Jews wrote the name in Greek letters between the 1st century BCE and the 2nd century CE. And they wrote Yahweh or Yahweh, which means the original had to be Yahweh.